Hi, everyone. This is Dave Edelman again with another one of my webinar series. And today I'm going to share a lot of learning. I have been on the road. I've been doing presentations for the last 18 months, at least one a week. Um, Virtual, but a lot of them live on stage, many different kinds of settings. And I thought it would be useful to build on the article that I posted and share two things. One is about presenting and about being in these forums and what resonates. And then, secondly, more specifically, about personalization itself and how that has resonated. And I'm going to now move to a slide, which I hope is going to be there. Okay, so 50 plus stages. It was a lot. Um, 50 live stages over 18 months. I did over 30 podcasts and a lot of things that I didn't expect to learn. It's not just about giving and presenting. You certainly learn a hell of a lot along the way. Before diving in, there's just a few things I want to present, I want to share in terms of a point of view. The most important thing is that if you're on stage as a speaker, or even if you're in a panel, you have more control than you realize about the setting. You need to make sure there's going to be a proper introduction and you know what they're going to say about you. You should know how the stage is going to actually be set. And if you're in a panel discussion, to be honest, you never want to be in a situation where you have more than three panelists. Four panelists, it's just too much, especially if everyone has to introduce themselves. Not much is going to come out of that. A moderator and three panelists is about the max you should do. If you're solo, you should not be standing behind a podium. As you can see, I hate podiums. I like being able to stand and interact. And you also want to have a lavalier mic so that you can use your hands and you don't have to hold on to a microphone. The more you can actually steer that, the better, especially if you can also get a confidence monitor. That would be bonus points, and certainly a timer so you understand how much you've got left. But that all being aside, one of the most important things about being up on stage, especially if you're up there for half hour, 45 minutes by yourself, it's actually closer to stand-up comedy than a lecture. It's just you up there with a thin backdrop of very lightweight slides. My goal is to keep the slides as minimal as possible, just here to illustrate points, not to provide words. And if it's just you, it's not just trying to inform. You've got to entertain. This is something where you've got to create a connection to the audience. You've got to bring oxygen in the room. You've got to establish yourself as a person and somebody they're going to be interested in, who's going to keep them really engaged for an hour. And certain things like starting with an outline of what you're going to talk about, oh my God, that just sucks the energy out of the room. You have to start with a story. And I've actually spent a fair amount of time looking at stand-up comics, most of whom have about an hour on stage. And I look at how they start, and inevitably they start with a story. They want to pull you in. It may be a story of how they got there, what their trip was, what the latest thing they had to deal with at home. It could be news, but it starts with a story, trying to connect themselves with you. And in the act of doing that, they start laying pipe for themes that they're going to pick up on as you move forward through the talk. But that whole opening of bringing that story in is something I see way too many presenters miss. It's this classical thing to say what you're going to say it, and then tell them what you've said. Business meeting, that's not what you're going to do when you're on stage, essentially performing before a conference. That's got to be much more of a story. And I've looked at TED Talks as well, and those are similar. They're nice and short, they're 17 minutes, and they're very focused on the story. And I think a lot of what has happened with PowerPoint is taking people away from a really good narrative. Now, I start with a story about how I was solicited to get solar panels. It's in my book, and it's a story where it's a real true story about myself when Lexington, Massachusetts offered a property tax discount for people to put solar panels on their roofs. And I talk about how I got a personalized URL sent to me. And then when I opened it, I saw this image of my roof, and they used data from Google Earth to precisely figure out how much energy those panels would generate, and then from Google to estimate the size of my house and then tell me how much I would save. And then I walk through all of my interactions with a salesperson and then with an app to make that buy. As I do it, I pause. I let certain key things sink in, like how they've cleverly used the data, including the longitude and latitude and east, west, north, south exposure of my roof. I talk about how my wife and I didn't even look at a competitor because they made it so easy. And I pause as I start going through the steps of the journey and how they move information through the journey. So, like opening with an agenda slide, don't list your three key points first. First, tell the story. Don't start with a framework. Tell the story. And then, with the story in people's minds, then you can reveal the framework underlying that story so that people can hang the framework on examples such as what you have just given in the story. I think often, especially consultants, start with frameworks, frameworks, frameworks. Don't start with a framework. Start with a story, and then the framework becomes more memorable because people have something to hang on it. Stories also need real people. When you talk in abstract about companies and you don't even name the companies, people get lost. It creates distance. They're not even sure you're telling the truth or you're making something up. Stories need real people. I'm lucky enough to have some personal stories, so I can bring that right in at the beginning. But then as I tell other stories, I bring out clients that I've worked with. Here and there, I may disguise their names, but I'm talking about real people in real roles who are trying to get something done. And data, you can show data about what a company did, but the human moment is what people remember. There's a really good example that I use about Sephora, where they went from just bombarding people with all kinds of offers to orchestrating those offers so that each individual always had three top priorities that they made sure those were the only three things that she saw. And if she did certain behaviors, they may dynamically change. But the key here was treating her like a Sephora customer, not just a hair care or skin care or another customer. And the real struggle is not the technology, it's not the algorithms, it's the organizational coordination and the strategy to say she's a Sephora customer. And we have to work through as a team all the different issues that arise from controlling who gets access to her. And how does that affect people who are running different categories and have targets? And bringing out that struggle and how they work through that resonates. Just simply saying someone did AI and then they accomplished this, and oh, isn't it cool? There's a lot of stories out there about that. People want to hear the real trade offs, struggles, how they had to work something through. Bring that out. Slides can kill you. On the left is an example of a slide that I saw from consultancy that will go nameless, although you may be able to pick it out. And oh my God, putting a slide like that on a screen is completely overwhelming. Nobody can follow that in any sizable room, especially if the people in the audience are over 40 and trying to use their glasses to see what's going on the screen. It's just simply too much. Kill every bullet point. If you're putting a slide like this up, you are competing with the slide for the audience. They are listening to you. Show, for example, this one step at a time through adding it. Make that one big, shrink the older ones so they become less important and fade, and just use that to walk through the total example so that it reinforces your story of a journey. But all of this detail is completely overwhelming and it's not going to be memorable. Your presence just gets completely lost. So you should only have diagrams, graphs, or pictures. And even the diagrams, you've got to make sure you control how you walk through it. I have just seen way too many people get up on stage trying to show the entire architecture for something that they've done. And everybody gets lost. They can't read it, they don't understand it. They're trying to read while she's talking. And it just creates in the audience's mind confusion as opposed to focus where they're really understanding your thread. One point of advice: treat every presentation as if you're giving a dinner talk. If you do a dinner talk, and I do a lot of those, you're probably going to get 20 minutes to talk to an audience with absolutely no slides. Practice your talk as if it were a dinner talk without any slides. And if you really want to push, here's an exercise that I did some acting lessons with the Actors Institute when I was younger. Start by just stand up or sit down, even better, and tell what might be a bedtime story to one of your kids. And then at a certain point, flip and tell the story that's going to open up your presentation so that you start thinking about connection, pacing, and really the story as opposed to the bullet points. Those are things I just don't see enough of. And it just kills me because some people have great material, but it's just getting lost in the complexity. So try to give your presentation without any slides and say the slides are just simply there here and there to give people a bit more magnification of what you're saying. Then it's about how you actually present. And often on stage, people are looking at the audience, but their eyes are moving around, moving around, moving around. Land on people. Go through a full sentence directly looking at one person. Make them look at you. Then move on to someone else. You can probably find people who are interested enough to do that as you look in the audience. Don't dart around. Make it meaningful. When you look at someone and they know you're looking at them and they look back at you, those are people who are engaged, and they usually are ones who come up to you afterwards. And when you do that, the whole room leans in. You can feel it. It just shows you're confident in telling your story to a person who you want to hear it. And I just find the energy that you get back is terrific. When you're just looking around an audience, generally, you get lost and you lose the connection. It's all about a personal connection, and it doesn't happen unless you look people in the eye, even on a big stage. And I've been on big stages with lights on me and as many as 800 people in the audience. You can still look, even if it has to be in some of the front rows, for people who you can actually see their faces, they see you, and connect with them. Make it a priority. You should also never have to look back at your slides. Look at your audience. You should know where you are. If you have a confidence monitor, it makes it easier. But otherwise, the slides should just simply be there to provide a backdrop. And you should just be talking, and the slides provide emphasis. They should never be a crutch. Then the last part of this first section is about frameworks. You only get one. You only get one framework. Keep it simple. Have it come up after you tell a story. Reinforce it constantly. Walk through it and tell stories, because what I do is I tell the story of the solar panels, then I show data on how personalization leads to higher impact, and you'll see that in just a bit. And then I say, well, how do you do that? We have a framework that we used in the book of the 5 promises of personalization. And then as I quickly walk through this, I landed back on points from my story. And then I start walking through each of these with a story that backs up each one. So you can use this also as a backbone where you can swap in and out stories for different sectors or different audiences. But the core spine of your framework holds. And you only get one. Never try to layer it. Constantly test yourself. Am I walking through more than one framework? And this is not just true in a stand-up audience, by the way. In a proposal, this is true. In meetings with clients, it is true. You only get one framework. Make it your spine. Use it, come back to it. And otherwise, everything else that you might think is just should be talking points that are coming back to reinforce. So those are the points that I want to make about being on stage and presenting. And again, coming back to the point of think of yourself like a stand-up comic up there. You're not just trying to consistently make jokes and make people laugh, but you do have to entertain. You do have to connection people. You do want to have stories, narratives, and especially for those of us who are marketers, it's all about the narrative. It's not about the bullet points. So make that connection. Really test whether you can give your presentation as if it were a dinner talk. So let me pivot to the things that I learned about the content itself on personalization. And it was very interesting doing this in rooms, stages in many different geographies: Seoul, San Francisco, Copenhagen, London, very different types of audiences across lots of different sectors, different kinds of levels of people, people from government. I was even at the United Nations. So everyone, though, had a certain set of consistencies about how they reacted to the material. The first was that everybody has their take on AI, and they all want to talk about how it changes the way people work, and people are concerned about job security, and they're concerned about their kids, and there's just a lot out there. One thing that personalization as a topic does is it sidesteps a lot of the AI hype. I actually don't talk per se about personalization. I talk about it as an enabler. I'm sorry, I don't talk about AI per se. I talk about AI as an enabler of personalization. Personalization gives AI a purpose. Personalization gives a strategy by which you can compete. Personalization done right on the high road, where you're adding value to a customer instead of just simply manipulating them, creates higher value. And in the work we did for the book, and I was lucky enough because I co-wrote it with Mark Abraham, the head of BCG's marketing practice, we had support from BCG to do some research. And we looked at the degree of personalization different companies offered, and we had a whole scaling by which we did that. We looked at the capabilities to deliver it and what the experience was. We did surveys, we did mystery shopping, and we rated people on a scale of 0 to 100. And those who scored higher, who were the leaders in personalization, consistently had higher growth rates, an average of 10% per year, compared to the laggards. And if you play this out, and even if you get more of the average to be leaders, you can see $2 trillion of growth by the end of the decade. And when you look at the ROI in terms of dollar return for investments, it's a 3x ROI for dollars invested in personalization versus only 50 cents for the laggards who are trying to pursue it. And there were, even though the laggards thought they were doing it, there were a lot of things that weren't happening in the actual delivery. Laggards, for example, may have thought that they were personalizing, but they were also bombarding people with uncoordinated messages. They were not really thinking through the customer journey, and people would come in through different channels and be totally confused. And so there's a lot of things that slip that I get into that people find useful. But overall, positioning personalization as a destination that IT makes possible has really resonated and still resonates even 18 months after the book has come out. The other thing is that personalization can actually bring humanity back. There's a term that's going around right now. I see it in a lot of conferences, the enshittification of customer experiences. That as more and more companies pushed people to use digital interfaces, those digital interfaces did not really address a lot of the issues that people had. If they call into a call center, they can't find their way to a person who can actually help them. Lots of times people are forced into boxes that don't fit their situation, and the whole experience becomes a turnoff. With personalization, with AI capabilities, you start to open up a lot more of the connection a brand can have with someone, and it makes it much more human. And a great example of that are the personalized videos that we used when I was chief marketing officer at Aetna. For all new Aetna members, they got a personalized video explaining their health insurance to them. Because if you just simply sent people email links for them to go to a website where they would just look at stuff, that was not a great experience. People did not understand their healthcare. So let's give them a very personalized video showing their plan, who their doctors were to make sure that was accurate. Where was there an urgent care center near them? Show it on a map so they wouldn't have to always go to an emergency room. Tell them about inoculations that they should be getting, all personalized. And by doing that, it was a home run. We had a 20% reduction in calls to the call center, more people registered for our online portal, decrease in churn, and the thing I'm most proud of is an 80% reduction in unnecessary emergency room visits. And so there's things you can now do in the customer experience to add value. That resonates with audiences. It's an important part of how to think about strategy going forward. Another thing I talk about, and this is actually a visualization of that Sephora example, is that personalization is not just a marketing opportunity, it's a C-suite imperative. Because doing something like coordinating all of the contacts that you have with a customer across channels is not necessarily something marketing alone can do. It involves, in the case of a retailer, it involves category managers, product managers, customer service, in-store operations. It's a lot of different parties that have to come together. There's also a lot of decisions on how you want to manage and coordinate that. Issues around who, if anyone, gets credit and what does that mean towards hitting their targets. That becomes a C-suite issue. That becomes something that has to be coordinated from the top. A C-suite that says, we want to grow our customers for the benefit of the overall brand, not just for each category. And personalization leaders have somebody reporting to the CEO. Often it is the chief marketing or chief experience officer who's leading the charge, but it's something that is coordinated at the C-suite level through regular management meetings, part of the strategy agenda. When I was at Aetna, every other of our executive strategy meetings, I would have an hour on the agenda to talk about where we were going, what we needed from everybody, what were some of the problems we needed to resolve. It was something that the C-suite together committed. And that's not just an AI thing, that's a strategy thing. And I think personalization brings up that cross-functional coordination that you hear a lot about in AI, that AI breaks down silos because it makes information available. And that's all true. But it also unlocks strategy discussions that need to happen across the leadership team. Another thing that comes out in personalization is that just pushing product isn't enough. You've got to think about, what does this person actually need given what you know about their situation? And increasingly now, if they're using agents, using chat windows to tell you more about their situation, they're not just looking at a product, they want a solution. So, there's research, and I believe this comes from Forrester. 57% of buyers complete their process online before they ever speak with a rep. And they're looking at a lot of different content before they pick up the phone. And that content has to help explain how the customer is going to get value given their situations. One of the most important things I do a lot with startup companies that I work with is getting them out of the headset of just thinking about their products and instead thinking about, what will it take for the customer to actually get the value? How are we providing a solution? What else has to happen in terms of changes that the company, the buyer has to make in order to actually get the value? And a good example of this, an industrial distributor I work with, is moving from just saying we sell parts to saying we help your production facility run. And we have a variety of solutions, everything from helping you figure out all the parts you need to respond to an RFP that your factory has gotten, to inventory management, to real-time supply management. That's a different company when you move to solutions. And one of the things that personalization does is it starts actually challenging your brand. Because if your brand is going from just providing products to providing solutions, you may need to reposition how you talk about your brand, how you emphasize it in all of your experience interactions. And I have 3 clients right now where this is leading to a rethink of their whole brand positioning, how their reps work with customers, how they think about the dialogue that they're going to have. And it's much more solution personalized focused than just pumping out products. So there's a deeper change going on, and AI is accelerating that. And then the last point, and I hope this picture gets a few laughs with my 2 labradoodles here, one of whom recently passed. Nonetheless, personalization is personal. And yes, that is the whole point. But it is astonishing how much campaign spend goes on that's just mass. I see this in all kinds of sectors, starting to work with a telecom company, with a financial service company, where an enormous amount of their spending is just on mass offers, big campaigns that are going very broadly, as opposed to thinking about the individual and the information you have about that individual and whether it's the right timing and what they need. There's a mindset shift that happens when you think about personalization because it's not about campaigns, it's about using all the data you have to be relevant to somebody from a timing, from a channel, from an offer perspective. And saying that, oh, we get zero point 0.3 response rates, click-through rates on our advertising, well, that's horrible. Um, so we have to think about how do we get that to a dramatically higher percentage, and maybe we need to completely step back and rethink the marketing that's going out the door. So very little of what I've actually talked about is per se AI. It's about a change in strategy, in mindset, in operations that's thinking about how to compete in a way that adds value to the customer. And that is the core spine of my talk on personalization. And it's why it seems to continue to resonate even 18 months after we published the book and with all of the other AI hype that's out there. So I encourage you, as you're thinking about how to respond, the pressure you're under to respond, you figure out what to do with AI. Put the AI to the side. Think about your brand, the way you compete, what's going to add value to the customer, and then work back and say, how can AI help us get there? Probably can. There's a lot of capabilities out there, but you should be thinking about it from a strategic lens. And then this is something I also do to wrap up my talks. I make it very clear that I'm not just here to tell, I'm here to learn. And I want to hear people's breakthrough stories. I want to get feedback. And so on the stage, I put up the QR code, leads people to my website. It encourages them also to connect me via LinkedIn. I promote my book. And I close in a way that tries to create an ongoing dialogue. It's not just about selling, it's about showing I want to be connected. And that resonates. It's something that comes through as I'm talking with clients and doing those kinds of presentations. So I want to come back and just simply thank you all for joining all of the webinars that we've done. I look forward to hearing your feedback on this in the comments on LinkedIn. Again, this will be up on LinkedIn. It'll be shareable. Anyone can see it. And I look forward to the future webinars that we'll have together. Thank you again. I really appreciate it. I love the feedback that you all give me, and I wish you all a great day. Thank you.